129 sailors had been dead for 61 years. Then one of them called. Lieutenant Commander Robert Hayes was supposed to have died when the USS Thresher sank in 1963. His name was on the memorial wall. His family had grieved for decades. But the man on the phone knew classified details that only a Thresher crew member could know, and what he revealed would expose the deadliest lie of the Cold War. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover the stories they buried in the depths and make sure no sailor stays forgotten. The call came at 3:17 a.m., April 11th, 2024. Dr. James Crawford was reviewing sonar data when his deep-sea research vessel's instruments detected something that made his blood freeze. Metal. Massive. 12,000 feet below the surface of the Atlantic, exactly where the USS Thresher was supposed to rest in pieces. Crawford had been searching for Thresher wreckage for over a decade. The official story was simple. Nuclear submarine suffered catastrophic failure during deep dive test. All hands lost. Case closed. But what his cameras revealed defied every assumption about the deadliest submarine disaster in US Navy history. The submarine was intact. Not destroyed, not imploded, not scattered across the ocean floor like they'd been told for 61 years. Sitting upright on the Atlantic floor, hull unbreached, as if it had simply landed there and been forgotten. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. Inside the command section, preserved by some miracle of engineering and frigid deep-sea conditions, Crawford's robotic cameras found evidence that turned everything upside down. Personal effects. Recent personal effects. A wristwatch stopped at 11:47 p.m. March 15, 2019. 46 years after the submarine supposedly sank. Someone had been living inside that submarine decades after it allegedly killed everyone aboard. 3 days later, Crawford received a call that changed everything. The voice was elderly, shaky, but spoke with the unmistakable authority of a career naval officer. Dr. Crawford, my name is Lieutenant Commander Robert Hayes, serial number 438927841. I served aboard USS Thresher. I've been waiting 61 years to tell someone the truth about what happened that day. Crawford nearly dropped the phone. According to Navy records, Lieutenant Commander Hayes had died with all hands when Thresher went down in 1963. Yet the man on the phone knew classified details about the submarine, about the crew, about events that only someone who'd been there could possibly know. Sir, that's impossible. The Thresher was lost with all hands. Hayes's bitter laugh crackled through the line. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. But 3 of us made it out. 3 of us survived what really happened down there. And it wasn't an accident. Hayes agreed to meet at a small diner outside Norfolk Naval Base. When Crawford arrived, he found a man in his early 80s, weathered by decades of carrying an impossible secret. His knowledge was flawless. Submarine procedures, crew names, technical specifications that only a Thresher veteran could know. April 10th, 1963, Hayes began, his coffee untouched. We weren't conducting a routine deep dive test. We were running from something that had been chasing us for 3 days. According to Hayes, Thresher had been on a classified mission, intercepting Soviet submarine communications near the Grand Banks, but they'd discovered something that wasn't supposed to exist. A Soviet nuclear submarine operating in American territorial waters, equipped with technology years ahead of anything the US Navy had seen. The Russians knew we'd found them. They couldn't let us report back. Hayes' hands trembled as he spoke. What happened wasn't mechanical failure. It was sabotage. They had someone inside our crew. The sabotage hadn't been designed to sink the submarine. It was meant to disable it, force an emergency surface, allow the Soviet sub to capture Thresher and its nuclear secrets. But something went wrong. The submarine lost power at crush depth, should have imploded instantly, killing everyone aboard. Instead, 3 crew members, Hayes, sonar technician Michael Torres, and nuclear engineer Patricia Collins, had been in an experimental escape pod when the attack occurred. The pod, a prototype design that didn't appear in any official records, had kept them alive in an air pocket within the submarine's hull. For 18 hours we waited in that pod, listening to the hull groan, watching our air supplies dwindle. Then we heard it. Metal against metal. Something was cutting into our submarine. What emerged through the hull wasn't American rescue equipment. It was Soviet naval personnel speaking Russian, wearing equipment Hayes had never seen. They extracted the 3 survivors not to rescue them, but to interrogate them about Thresher's nuclear capabilities and classified mission parameters. They took us to a facility that didn't exist on any map. Somewhere cold, remote. Could have been Siberia, could have been the Arctic. For months they tried to break us, make us reveal submarine warfare secrets. When that failed, they made us an offer. The offer was simple: complete cooperation in exchange for survival. The 3 Americans would be relocated, given new identities, allowed to live quiet lives in exchange for occasional intelligence consultation. The alternative was execution and burial in unmarked graves. Collins refused. Said she'd rather die than betray her country. Hayes's voice broke. They shot her in front of us to make a point. Torres and I, we weren't as brave. For 20 years, Hayes and Torres had lived under Soviet protection, providing technical assistance for submarine development programs. They'd been consultants on underwater warfare systems, nuclear reactor design, sonar countermeasures, American naval secrets feeding directly into Soviet military advancement. But in 1983, everything changed. A new Soviet administration, seeking better relations with the West, decided their American assets had become liabilities. Torres was relocated to a remote village and told to disappear completely. Hayes was given a choice: return to America with a fabricated story about miraculous survival or face the same fate as Collins. They gave me a new identity: Robert Hayes, close enough to my real name, Robert Henderson, that I wouldn't slip up under pressure. Said if anyone investigated too closely, they had evidence of my collaboration that would destroy me. Hayes had spent 40 years in limbo, neither dead nor truly alive, watching from the shadows as the Navy honoured the crew of USS Thresher, including himself, as heroes who died in service to their country. He'd attended memorial services for his own death, watched his widow remarry, seen his children grow up believing their father had been a war hero rather than a Cold War survivor living under Soviet protection. "Why come forward now?" Crawford asked. Hayes reached into his jacket and pulled out a faded photograph. It showed 3 people in Soviet naval uniforms standing beside what was unmistakably the intact USS Thresher in a massive underground facility. The submarine had been raised, studied, reverse-engineered for decades. Torres died last month. Natural causes, finally. Before he passed, he sent me this. Proof that Thresher didn't sink. Proof that everything they told our families, our country, our Navy was a lie constructed to hide the greatest intelligence failure in American naval history. The photograph revealed something that reframed the entire Cold War submarine program. The Soviets hadn't just captured 3 American sailors. They'd captured America's most advanced nuclear submarine, intact, with all its classified technology, weapons systems, and nuclear materials. Every Soviet submarine advancement from 1965 onward, every improvement in their nuclear propulsion, every breakthrough in their sonar systems, had been reverse-engineered from American technology, stolen when USS Thresher was secretly raised from the Atlantic floor. Crawford stared at the photograph, understanding the implications. How many people knew? At the highest levels, maybe a dozen. The cover-up went all the way to the Pentagon, maybe the White House. They couldn't admit that our most advanced submarine had been captured intact, that 3 crew members had been turned into Soviet assets, that decades of American naval superiority had been built on compromised technology. Over the following weeks, as Crawford worked with Hayes to verify his story, more evidence emerged. Soviet archives, opened briefly in the 1990s, contained references to Project Deep Strike, the capture and analysis of an American nuclear submarine. Satellite imagery from the 1960s showed unusual activity at remote Soviet naval facilities consistent with submarine analysis operations. Most damning of all, technical analysis of Soviet submarine designs from the 1970s revealed components and systems identical to USS Thresher specifications, down to manufacturing details that could only have come from direct examination of the original equipment. The Navy's response was swift and predictable. They acknowledged that new information had come to light, but maintained that USS Thresher had been lost with all hands in 1963. Hayes was dismissed as either a fraud or a victim of psychological trauma who had constructed elaborate false memories. But Hayes had prepared for this response. Hidden in a safety deposit box for 4 decades were technical documents, Soviet naval manuals, and detailed schematics that could only have come from someone with access to both American submarine technology and Soviet engineering programs. The documents revealed the scope of the intelligence disaster. Not only had the Soviets captured Thresher's nuclear technology, but they'd used Hayes and Torres to identify weaknesses in American submarine design, communication protocols, and strategic deployment patterns. Every American submarine that had operated during the Cold War had been vulnerable to countermeasures developed using information provided by the 2 survivors. Congressional hearings were quietly initiated. Families of Thresher crew members were privately contacted and asked to provide DNA samples for comparison with remains that the Navy claimed had been recovered from the wreckage. The results were classified, but sources familiar with the investigation suggested that many of the supposed remains had never actually belonged to Thresher crew members. Hayes, now living under federal protection while investigations continued, had become a living reminder of the costs of Cold War secrecy. His story revealed not just the loss of 1 submarine, but decades of compromised naval operations, technological theft, and families who had grieved for husbands, fathers, and sons who had actually survived their supposed deaths, only to become unwilling traitors. "I'm not looking for forgiveness," Hayes told congressional investigators during closed-door testimony. "I'm not looking for understanding. I just want the families to know the truth about what happened to their loved ones." Collins died a hero, refusing to betray her country. Torres and we made different choices. But all of us deserved better than to be erased from history to cover up someone else's failures. The full truth of USS Thresher may never be completely revealed. Too many documents remain classified, too many participants have died, too many secrets remain buried in both American and Russian archives. But Hayes' testimony has forced a recognition that the submarine's loss wasn't just a tragic accident, but a catastrophic intelligence failure that shaped decades of Cold War naval warfare. Today, Hayes visits the USS Thresher Memorial in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where his own name is engraved alongside those of his fallen crew members. He places flowers beneath names he recognizes, faces he remembers, friends who died not in service to their country, but as casualties of a secret war that continued long after their official deaths. The memorial reads, "They gave their lives in the advancement of naval nuclear propulsion." Hayes knows better. They gave their lives to keep a secret that took 61 years to surface, and the full truth may remain submerged forever. But some secrets are too heavy to stay buried in the depths, and sometimes when the pressure becomes too great, they rise to the surface where they can no longer be ignored. No matter how much damage they might cause to the carefully constructed stories we tell ourselves about honor, service, and the true costs of the Cold War. Every day, we share stories of courage and sacrifice that deserve to be remembered. If these forgotten heroes inspired you, please subscribe to Untold Legends Stories and hit the notification bell to make sure you never miss the stories they tried to sink. Your support helps us bring these important tales to light. Like this video if it moved you, and share your thoughts in the comments below. These sailors waited 61 years to have their voices heard. Let's make sure their stories reach everyone who needs to hear them.